Good. Here we are. It's September 14th. I'm a month late. It's September 14th, and this is part 2. We're continuing an interview with Uncle Jack on Kemp family reminiscence. So we've asked him a question. He's going to answer it right now.
Well, you want to tell him what the question is?
The question is 2 parts. How did grandmother get into Christian Science? We understood it was a long time ago. And number 2, how did Mom and Dad get into Christian Science?
Well, that's really an interesting story. You know, my father had some real precious horses, and he just really loved those horses. And they were out on the farm, and they were digging a well. And one of these horses, at some unknown time, disappeared, and they finally found, by searching around a little bit, they found out the horse had fallen into this well. And so, of course, out in a country like that, why it became real newsy. So people came from all over, veterinarians from different counties, and even somebody came out from Milwaukee or Minnesota, and they were already out there, and they were rigged up an A-frame over the well to rescue the horse. And they finally lassoed the hind legs. Well, about this time, my mother had heard about this woman that went away on some religious deal in a town like that. It was quite a newsy thing. They thought, well, she must be some kind of a fanatic or something. And she happened to be a woman that went away and took class to become a Christian Science practitioner. And she was a well-known lady in town, and so she was a good friend of the family. And so my mother got to thinking about this thing. Well, I wonder if this would work for the horse. Let's see what it is. And so, unbeknownst to the rest of them, she called this lady up. And this lady gave her some truths that she knew and some citations from Science and Help. And she completely dismissed what was going out in the yard. There were probably 50 or 60 people out there at the well site. And they had guns already there, rifles, to shoot the horse when they brought it up. So she went in another room and just completely dismissed it and took these citations that this woman had given her. And my mother worked alone on this thing and had the practitioner help her, but she didn't know anything about this. And finally, she heard this noise out there, and they finally pulled the horse up out of the well by its 2 hind legs, and they were all aiming their rifles at it. Several of them were anyway, and they thought they were going to have to shoot the horse. Well, they finally got the rear legs out from out of the ropes and so forth, and the horse ran away.
Is that
and
right?
Here it had fallen in this well, which was about, I think, 12 feet deep. And so right away, that really made an impression on my mother.
About when was that, Jack? Do you have any?
Well, that must have probably been about, well, it was long before I was born, but probably I would say about 1850 or something like that.
Huh.
Maybe 1860, along in that period anyway. But that horse just survived that whole episode, and it was perfectly great. My father is certainly jubilant over that.
See, that's a neat story.
Yeah, and that's something that miraculous.
Yeah.
I like to tell that story.
And so grandmother became devoted.
Oh yeah, sure. She
from that point on.
Sure. Of course, she relied on it. We were all brought up in science. And I can always remember my Uncle Raul. I don't know whether you knew him or not. He was
Barely.
He was a well-known physician. In fact, he was one of the 10 highest insured men in the United States. He was a physician, but he knew what it was all about, because he and my mother were real close. Because when her mother gave birth to him, my mother gave birth to Frank, my oldest brother, and she nursed both the babies because her mother had to go some kind of an institution or something. Wasn't that an interesting thing?
Yeah, we had that on the
And so,
original
of course, you
tape.
see, he really worshipped her. I can always remember him. Sometimes, if I was under the weather, I was the one that made a big impression on. And I can remember laying in bed there one day, and of course, anything that happened around our house.
And were you on Soto Street
Uncle
then?
Raw, we're on Soto Street then, yeah. And he came in and he walked in the door, and then I can just see him walked in there, and of course, he always put his thumb in his vest like this, you know, and he stood there. And he looked at him, he turned to my mother and he said, "You've got something that we haven't got." And he was just so great. Well, anyway.
Jack, before you go on,
Yeah.
what was his name? Was his name John French?
John Rolland French.
John Rolland French.
Yeah.
Everybody called him Uncle Rawl.
Uncle Raw, yeah.
Right.
Right. Uh-huh.
And he was grandmother's oldest brother?
Youngest brother.
Youngest brother.
See, because he was born the same time Frank was born, my oldest brother.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
The oldest was,
Frank.
no, I'm talking about of the French boys, of the French kids.
family. Well, there was Nellie was the oldest.
Oldest.
And then my mother, and then Uncle Ed, and then Dolly, her name was Irene, and then John Rolland French.
What about Dimple?
Well, that was Dolly.
Was that Dolly?
Yeah, we used to call her that.
Oh, I didn't realize that Dimple and Dolly were
Yeah.
the same.
Right, and of course, you know, she was deaf, you know,
And blind at the end.
who?
Dimple was both deaf and blind.
Dimple, yeah.
I remember she was taught by Helen Keller, wasn't she?
I think that's who it was.
Yeah, because I remember going over to the Soto Street house, and did Dimple and Dolly live on? Well, is Dimple and Dolly? No, Dolly was the doctor, right?
Yeah, she was a medical doctor, yeah, sure. She lived around the corner from us.
The three I remember were Doll, Dimple, and Nettie,
Yeah.
and they lived together around the corner.
No, they lived separately because Aunt Doll married a man that was a Christian Scientist, and he had 3 daughters, and here she was a medical doctor, and boy, I tell you, that was really a really deal, because, you know.
A tough marriage, was it?
Yeah. And Aunt Dimple lived over there by Hollenbeck Park, you know. You remember that house, I'm sure.
I sure do.
Yeah.
I remember that there, when the doorbell rang, there was a light that went on
Yeah.
over the arch, and then she became blind and she couldn't see that. And somebody lived with her. Was it Doll that lived with her?
Uncle Ed lived with her for quite a while, and then he finally married some gal. He was a devoted bachelor, but he finally got married.
Did he finally get married?
That blew up, yeah.
He used to drive a big, what was the car? Remember, he'd drive up, Uncle Ed would drive up to our house in Hollywood in a big old car. It was old. It was
I
even.
forgot what the name of it was. It was something like that.
It was a huge old.
Yeah, he was quite a boy. Isn't that funny how it stands out in your mind?
Yeah.
Too? Yeah.
I remember going over to their house. I remember very clearly Nettie, Dimple, and Doll, and I remember Aunt Dimple had a glove with letters on it of the alphabet.
Oh yeah.
And you'd talk to her by pressing various points on her glove. And then she'd respond to you and begin to talk. Do you remember that?
Yeah, sure. And that was quite an interesting deal. She had this glove that she could talk to by pushing the different letters.
She had
on
a
the
white glove with letters of the alphabet and numbers
Just
on it.
printed on the top.
And you'd push different. You'd spell out words on this glove.
Yeah.
And then she would respond, and you'd press out some basic words to her, and her face would light up. She had the sweetest face,
Yeah.
and she was the most articulate talker and speaker of anybody in the whole family.
Oh, yeah,
she was so highly educated, and
She was a great prohibited, what do you call
Prohibitionist,
it?
was she?
Prohibitionist, yeah. I tell you, I can always remember her working on your dad.
really,
Because, well, you know, he was kind of her pet. And she was afraid that he was going to, you know, might lean towards drinking or something, you know. I just remember her getting him in a corner, and boy, she would just let him have all
Really?
of it. Yeah, prohibition.
What were these ladies into the suffrage movement years ago?
Well,
Do you
she
remember?
was.
She was?
in it, yeah. She was.
She was a suffragette, huh?
Yeah. It was sure an interesting deal. 'Cause, boy, anything that had to do with liquor, boy, she was death on it.
She was highly educated,
Yeah.
and she had the most expressive face, and her eyes would light up. You know, even though she was blind and deaf, she couldn't hear or. Do you remember?
She
You
was-
remember
she
the
was
story of
deaf
Helen
first.
Keller?
Oh, absolutely.
And she taught. Who was the one that she taught? That the famous child that. Oh, Helen Keller. Helen Keller was the child.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the.
Annie something.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, I've got the names mixed up.
Mhm.
It was the lady who taught Helen Keller, who also taught Aunt Dimple.
Yeah, I'm sure glad you remember all that because that was quite an interesting gal. Her husband used to be superintendent of Sunday school, superintendent of schools in Santa Ana.
Is that right?
And yeah, and he was a real popular man because he used to go all around the country and give talks about schooling, you know, and so forth. And you've probably heard of Martin Aviation Company.
Sure, yeah.
They lived right next door to him. I can remember that just as well. And he built his first little airplane out in their barn. In those days, they were barns.
In Santa Ana?
Yeah, right. And then, of course, that's where Orange County Airport is. It was just a little out in the country airport at that time.
Yeah.
And that's where they get the name Martin.
Jack, where did the relationship with Steve Briggs come from? And there's another famous guy that was involved. With
Yeah,
grandmother.
his mother and my mother were just like sisters. And I can remember how he used to, every time he would ever come to California or anything, or even when they were out in South Dakota, they were good friends because they were friends back there too. But he'd always come to see her out there when we lived on Soto Street and then when we lived on Heliotrope. But he was head of this Briggs Stratton company, which make most of these motors for the, lawnmowers
and
blowers and all that kind of thing.
They used to make outboard motors too, I think.
Yeah, they made outboard. I forget what the name of their outboard motor was.
I think
And-
Briggs and Stratton were the first small gasoline engine company in the United States.
Yeah.
Right.
And they specialized in making very
And
small.
quite an interesting thing, he went broke about 3 times before he hit it, and really made it strong there at the last, he was really...
I remember driving grandmother out to the airport when Steve Briggs would fly in on his private plane.
You were out there with us, weren't you?
Yeah.
And Dorothy and her mother went out too, and you, and they were out there, of course, Dorothy wouldn't fly, and my mother would never fly. And he came out to the house one day. I just remember we were sitting there talking in the living room because I was quite interested in flying, youngster. And we got to talking, and he said, he always called her Mother Kemp. He says, Mother Kemp, he says, wouldn't you fly with me? And she says, sure I would. And so he went over there and he picked up the telephone, and his private plane had gone back to Florida for some purpose or something. And so he picked up that phone and called Florida, and he says, have Bob come out right away as soon as he can get here. And so the next day he was out there at LA airport, and we drove out there, and I remember you were with us, and Dorothy and her mother, and I went with them. So Dorothy wouldn't fly, or her mother wouldn't, so my mother, you didn't fly with us though, did
No,
you?
no.
Because we didn't have the permission from your folks. See? So my mother and I went with Mr. Briggs in his plane, and he had these 2 pilots, and all dressed in natty looking uniforms, and of course, we got in there, and boy, we flew all over practically, I was going to say Southern California. And she came back and she said, that wasn't bad after all.
I remember people helping her up the
little
ladder.
steps there.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
Yeah, because she had a tough time.
Yeah. And I didn't know he was in that.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that something?
And he was a major famous guy.
Oh, wasn't he? Yeah.
There's somebody else, well, it'll come to me, but there was some other quite famous guy that apparently loved grandmother, or
Oh, yeah.
I'll try to think of it before
yeah,
we
well,
finish taping here.
I'm glad you thought about that, because that was an interesting thing.
Jack, to satisfy Tom's question, how did Mom and Dad get into Christian Science?
Well, that was quite an interesting deal. About that time, you were having quite a problem with asthma. And I used to, your dad and I, of course, were in business at that time, and I think it was like Tuesdays and Fridays. Your mom had to bring you down to, out there near 6th and Westlake Avenue there near MacArthur Park. And I think it was those 2 days that your dad always had to take off to go out and meet, because you had to, your mom wanted him with you. And they used to go out there, and he'd have to go out there and get these shots. And it really
How old was I then? 2 years old, 1 year old?
I know. I imagine you were probably about 6 or long in there, about that age. And twice a week you had to get those shots, and boy, that cost a lot of money. Of course, any amount would have been a lot of money in those days, but that was quite a big expense, you know. And of course, my mother was very reluctant about trying to tell a daughter-in-law what to do. And that was one thing she always swore up and down she would never do, is try to run her.
Except when it came to bicycles and bars on the window.
But anyway, so finally, in the back of my mother's mind, and of course she'd tell me these stories, she said, if I could just get them interested in Christian Science, you know. And finally, I can always remember that day. It was one of the happiest days I ever had, was when that went home, you know, and my mother said, what do you think? Francis was over today and asking me all about Christian Science.
Oh, for heaven's sake, is that right?
And so then they took you to, after that, they just used Christian Science, went to practitioners.
So if I was 6 years old, that was like circa 1934.
That was just about when it was,
34,
yeah.
35,
Yeah.
somewhere.
Because we were in the motorcycle business then.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I remember going to I think it was not Church of Christ, but a Christian church out on was it Wilshire Boulevard? I remember going to Sunday school as a little teeny guy, and I remember we played with little cloth chickens.
Yeah.
I think I went home and I told my mother that, and I think she jerked me out of the Sunday school. And I think the next thing I remembered, I was in Sunday school over at 26th Church.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it was quite a thrill for me to see your dad elected for first reader.
Boy, that was something else.
That was something. You know.
He had a tough time accepting that over the years, didn't he? Because I think he begged off a couple of times, didn't he?
Well, yes, they wanted him to be a reader, but he finally took it.
And that was just about wartime, wasn't it? It was.
I guess it was about
It was
that time.
39 or 40 or 41, 42.
Around 40, I think. Quite an interesting thing. I got to tell this story on it. Your dad was elected first reader. Then the election for the second reader came up, and there was two sisters that lived together and were members of the church. And one of them was really an old maid. Boy, she was an old maid, boy. And the other sister, one sister had read already, so she wasn't eligible. So the other one said rumor got around, you know, well, who we're going to elect for second reader, you know. Well, I always tell this story because the time came, we were standing out in the lobby, and somebody came up and said to your dad, how about Miss So-and-so? She was a maiden lady. How about her? Your dad said, gosh, no, I don't want her. and her sister was standing right there in back of one of us. And her dad, and of course, she wasn't elected.
Elsie Bowman was elected.
Elsie Bowman, yeah, you remember her. Yeah.
Darn right I do. I'll never forget her. Do you remember Elsie Bowman? Yeah.
Yeah, that's something. But I always like to tell that story. And your dad said, "Gosh, no, I don't want her sister stand right there." But he sure put in some good readings. I'll tell you that, boy.
Oh, yeah, well, we were so proud of him, and at the point that he was elected reader, we built on that. We took that side porch on the Plymouth house.
Oh yeah.
And Dad had a carpenter come out, and they made a room out of that.
Yeah, for his.
Oh.
I think that eventually
Yeah, I saw
became
that
Dick's
room.
bedroom. Do you remember that room, Ann?
Yeah, that's something.
But they closed that in for Dad to have a study when he became reader.
Yeah, right.
And then Mother took it over when she became.
And then when he finished reading, well, then your mother was elected second reader,
Right.
and it turned out to be quite a thing. We were sure proud of him. Boy, I tell you.
You know, we had a lot of humor in our family. I used to tease Dad about reading. And Dad said, "Well, I'll just hide behind the desk if I make a mistake."
One,
was so funny.
one story I now like to tell on your dad. This always it's a spot. He was chairman of some committee. I forget what the committee was. And he was chairman of this committee, and everybody was walking up on the rostrum and give their report. And so your dad walked up there, and some of them got kind of long and dragging out and so forth. Well, I think your dad was one of the last ones. And so he walked up on the platform, and you know what a manifold is of papers, of records, they all
Pull up,
all together, So your dad walked up there, and of course I knew this was going to happen. And he walked up there, he says, "Well, my report's going to be short." Boy, the people laughed and got like that. And then he dropped this thing down, and here it was, all these papers. Oh, that tore the church apart.
He had the greatest sense of humor.
Didn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, that was sure a great one. But boy, I tell you, after he started reading, there's no two ways about it. The attendance sure picked up a lot. I tell you, there was an expression and love from the platform.
You could feel it, couldn't
Yeah,
you?
you could feel it.
Yeah.
Even my sister-in-law and brother, Oscar and May, she was a devoted Catholic, And I was ushering down in front one day, and my gosh, I looked up like that, and I just couldn't believe it. Here this sister-in-law and brother, devoted Catholics, came walking into the church
See
with my
Dad,
mother
to hear Dad
him read. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't that something? I got the biggest kick. Oh, and your dad said afterwards, he says, "Well, how did you like it?" She says, "Well, I didn't believe a word you'd read." I tell you, we sure had humor around there.
Oh, we sure did. That was so many funny things.
Yeah.
Of course, Dad had the sense of humor. There wasn't anything that he couldn't turn into a humorous
Yeah, right. Yeah.
or a joke. Jack, let's make sure that we go back and try to recapture Dad in high school and then leaving high school for the Navy. Can we pick up where we left off on that story? Remember, you said that he was in high school and he was playing ball.
Oh yeah, I guess I touched on that deal, didn't I? Where, of course, your dad just worshipped me, so he always, when he could, he would take me to these ball games at different high schools, when they'd have to travel on. Did I touch on that at all?
Go ahead. I think I don't
Anyway,
know if I picked it
He
up.
took me down this time down to Manual Arts High School, which was down on South Vermont Avenue, and I of course was in a sitting up in the bleachers, and your dad came to bat, and the score was tied, and I think it was about the 8th inning, and the score was tied, and boy, things were sure tense, and this was, I think, a semi-final, as I remember, and so boy, come on Pete, come on Pete, of course he had made me blush and everything else. And here is I was sitting there watching, when he had 2 on bases, and they were hollering at, "Come on, Pete," and this is about the 8th inning, and of course, Pete gets up there, and I think that ball is still going. It went clear over into the building and went through a skylight. Now that's how far that was. When you hit
He really
that
socked it.
Yeah. And of course, that cinched the game for them because they got 3 runs in, you see, and it really took it out of the scope of any further deal. I always think about that deal. That was
Now try to. When was that? He was in high school from? Can we put a time frame on that?
I was trying to think about that the other day, about the timing of that deal.
Just before World War I.
Yeah, I think he was about the 11th grade, see, because he had to quit school then when the war was on end.
So we got into the war in 17? 1917?
About 17, I think, was when that was, yeah.
Did he finish high school?
High school, yeah.
He finished, but he completed
No, I don't think
the
he
12th.
graduated.
No, he
Did
didn't graduate. So he went into the
So
Navy.
he had to leave high school. Oh,
Yeah.
isn't it?
I always like to tell the story too about your dad was in the Navy and he's fighting the Battle of Pier 7 or Pier 9.
Yeah, right.
up there
Right.
near the ferry building in San
Famous
Francisco.
story.
And anyway, of course, my mother wanted a letter every day from him, you know, and he'd skip it, you know, once in a while. And so finally, she didn't hear from him for a few days. What did my mother do? I don't know whether she wrote or phoned, got a hold of his commanding officer.
The way I heard of it, she phoned.
Yeah. And he called your dad into the office. I guess I told you that on the other tape. But
I don't know. Go ahead.
anyway, I called him into the office. And he says, "Sit down." He sat down. He said, "Don't you ever write your mother?" and I tell you, that really said, "Oh, he says, he called some girl in or something, gave a piece of paper and a pen. Now sit down there and write her a letter. Now don't you leave here till you write it." And you know another interesting
That
thing.
was grandmother. That was
Yeah.
that was Elderberry
Another
Kemp.
thing that was interesting, and we had a cousin that was he was colonel in charge of engineer corps,
Mm-hmm.
and his headquarters were at Stanford University. And of course, he loved your dad too. He was a great guy.
Let's identify him.
Clarence Sturdivant.
Clarence Sturdivant. Right. And what relation?
Well, he was now at Dolly's
Son.
son. Yeah, that's how it was. Yeah.
And I interviewed Beth Sturdivant, and I'm trying to figure out where.
You've
It's
got
been
the.
so long, and I
Have you
have
got
that on
the stages of all the relatives that you could? You know, I've always felt badly because when I cleaned out Marion's stuff, you know, after she left, she had all that stuff, and
You can't figure out where it went?
I can't figure out where it went to or anything else, but there's something.
Would one of your kids have it, do you think?
I haven't the least idea because I sure was sorry that I ever let that go or I get. But the other thing I like to tell about your
Because Jack,
dad.
that hasn't been that long ago. See, since she
Well-
left, that was what, 10 years ago?
Oh, it's longer than that. Oh gosh, it's got to be 20 years. Because Dorothy was still here then.
Okay.
But anyway, the other thing about your dad, he just Clarence, just you know, he just liked your dad and everything. And here he was stationed there at Stanford University, and your dad was stationed down at Pier 9, and so he'd go up to San Francisco to take your dad out to dinner and entertain him or something, you know. And of course, here he was a colonel, and a colonel in the Army in those days was really something. Now they're a dime a dozen.
And the dad was a seaman,
Dad, he
third
was
class probably.
And they'd walk down the street, you know, and everybody'd have to salute the colonel, you know. And your dad got the biggest kick out of whether they were saluting for him or saluting for the colonel or something else. So finally, Clarence got wise to it, you know, and then sometimes didn't wear his uniform. He said, well, that was really a joke for us to do, you know, everybody had to salute him.
Just one quick
Yeah.
moment here. Clarence Sturdivant went on to become a major general, didn't he? Or
Brigadier general.
Brigadier general.
Whatever's the second highest general in
Okay.
charge of the engineering corps. I know he had responsibility of building the Alaskan Highway.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I always remember about him when I went to Seattle one time. I went up there, and of course they entertained me. And he had a boat, you know, from the army boat, and to go places for, you know, construction and so forth. And I always remember that about what kind of a fellow he was. He took me out on this boat, and boy, did we have a trip, you know, all around Seattle and all that in the bay and so
Okay.
forth. When he came back, they stopped by the dock down there and refueled the gas in it, and he took the money right out of his pocket and paid for
Paid
it.
for the gas.
That's the kind of a man he was.
Because it was a personal trip.
Because it was a personal deal. That's the kind
What year was that? Can you remember?
Oh gosh, I should remember those things, shouldn't I? But
Well,
it
no,
was,
just a
it was probably about 1928 or 29. Let's see. No, it must be. No, it must have been about 31. About 31, because I was married in 38 to Dorothy.
Yeah.
So, he was sure a great guy. But anyway, we always got a kick out of your dad didn't come here.
See if that thing paused, would you?
No, still going. So,
How's that? Okay, here we go again.
Well, anyway,
Jack, the part that I'm eager to make sure we do not miss this time is Dad coming out of high school, and that would be approximately just as the war began, right? He would have been in the 11th grade, you said.
Yeah, he was in 11th grade.
And that's approximately 1917. And then he was in the Navy for what, 2 years?
About 2 years.
2 years. Now, in that time, grandmother had moved to Heliotrope from Soto Street, or no, you said there was a house in between Heliotrope, a house in between Soto Street and Heliotrope. They went for a year or two in some other house.
We went over on Oxford Street,
Oxford
and Washington.
But when Dad came out of the Navy, did he go back to Oxford Street or to Heliotrope?
Yeah, Oxford Street.
Oxford Street.
Because then he went to work for Agler and Musser Seed Company.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was about 1919 then?
I would think that'd be about 1919. Yeah.
Okay.
The story I always like to tell about that house on Oxford was we had a deck out off the backyard, and your dad thought it was great, and for me too. We had our beds out there, and of course,
Kind of a sleeping porch type thing?
like a sleeping porch. It was all exposed, but it worked great during the good weather. And I always remember your dad took my mother out someplace to some entertainment. Of course, so I went to bed, got late. Come to find out when they got home, they didn't have a key to the house. So, boy, I can hear that voice right today. They went out in the driveway in the back of the house. Hey, Red, wake up! Red, wake up! And so they couldn't wake me up. And finally Dad said, well, I know I'll get him rain. So he picked up the garden hose and squirted it up there. And that didn't wake me up. I pulled the covers over my head and I said, oh, this rain won't last long. And that's how they finally got me up. Of course, when I pulled the covers over my head and everything, and kind of settled down a little bit, and they hollered at Red again. So that's the way they got me up on it. I always think about that deal.
You must have been, at that point, you were born in '04.
Yeah.
So at that point, that must have been about you were 15 years old, roughly.
Yeah, I went to Polytechnic High School then.
I see.
Yeah.
And this was Oxford Street near what cross street?
Well, Oxford ran parallel with Western Avenue, a block east,
Oh, okay.
Washington.
Okay.
just
And
south
near what? Oh, Washington.
Washington and
Okay.
Western. And
So Dad came back and he went to work for Agler and Musser,
yeah.
and they gave him a company. So go on with, because I remember that was a great.
Well, I think I told you, didn't I, about how Mr. Musser just worshipped your dad too, of course, and so many people did. Mr. Agler was a man, a standoff man, you know, and you couldn't make up to him or anything. He just didn't like anything. And Mr. Musser just worshipped him. And I think I told you that they used to buy him a brand new Dodge every March or like that, so that when June came around, he could take us camping on his vacation. Now, wasn't that a real thing?
What a sweet thing.
So they'd have about 5 months to break that car in to have him be able to use it. And he used to come home around 5 or 5:30 at night. And one of the items they specialized in that store that he worked in down there by the wholesale market was plants, like tomato plants, peppers plants, and all these kind of plants and flats, you know. And
Vegetables, huh?
vegetables, yeah, and because the farmers were all right there across the street, you see. They bring their food in there for the market. And kind of a guy your dad was, he'd come home around 5 o'clock at night with a trailer attached to the car, and pick up my mother, or our mother, and me, and maybe Marion went with us, and we drive down to the place. There was a source of supply for these plants down in Manhattan Beach.
That's a long trip.
And that was a long trip in those days, yeah. And I always remember this. He'd do that maybe about 3 nights out of a week. and 2 at the least.
Hard worker.
Yeah, and everything, and they never compensate him a dime for doing this thing. And I was thinking that same thing when I was driving down here this morning. I can remember going out there and with your dad driving the car and everything, and that fog would roll in there down the beach area down there near the LA airport and everything. You couldn't see your hand in front of you. And your dad used to have to look out there and try to look. They didn't have lines painted on the highways in those days. But he would do that night after night for them. Like I say, at least 2 nights a week.
So he transported their stock of
Yeah.
plants from the growing areas into.
Into the plant.
Did Agler and Musser grow their own plants?
No, they bought
bought
them from
them?
the supplier down there, yeah. And,
Dad used to sell to Japanese truck farmers. I remember him talking about the
oh, gosh.
Japanese and Italian, and is that right?
Yeah. Mainly Japanese. I can remember one time he took me out with him, to go with him. And out there around Crenshaw Boulevard, south of Adams, that low flat area out there, that was all Jap farmers out there. And they just rows upon rows of plants growing vegetables and so forth. And of course your dad, if a Jap, they'd work out in the family, and the family would be out with him, with a Jap, working in the rows of these plants. And of course, your dad would always make up to the kids, and that made a big hit with the farmer, And there's one fellow that his wife wasn't there this day that I happened to be out. His wife wasn't with him out there working. And he says, "Where's so-and-so?" And the man says, "Oh, she baby last night. She baby last night." She had a baby the night before. And here she took time off, and I remember your dad said about 2 days later she was out there working in the field again.
Yeah,
Boy, and I tell you, in those days, a woman used to go in the hospital for a week or so.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the way your dad got these good customers.
He was a good salesman, wasn't he?
Well, he sure was. Well, it was kind of just built into the deal because he'd win the hearts of these Japanese fellas. And he had a lot
How
of
did Dad get that job?
I think he answered an ad in the paper. They asked, and they needed a clerk in their store down there.
Because he didn't have any experience, did he?
No, he didn't know anything.
He was out of the Navy.
Yeah, he didn't.
Hadn't
know
finished
anything
high school.
No, and he hadn't had a bit of experience in growing a tomato or anything. That's sure something. But like I say, it sure was a blessing to him and a blessing to everybody. But
That meant a lot to the family, didn't it? Because it gave you all transportation that you didn't have. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We were talking the other night about Lake Tahoe, and I always remember one time your dad took us up to Lake Tahoe, and of course, it was always June, just as soon as school was out, And the thing that reminded me of it, somebody was saying about Lake Tahoe just the other night, and I remember this deal about your dad. He's always, first thing he could get up there, we'd get the tent set up and all that stuff, and your dad would put on his bathing suit, boy, he'd head for the lake, And he got out probably as far as from here to the street out there, And it was ice water, and your dad had one heck of a time to get back. He was just so frozen. That's how it affected him. And boy, he's come back to me and he says, "Red," he says, "I never thought I'd make it." It was so cold, and water in Tahoe, could get pretty darn cold, especially in the wintertime. This would be always, about the 10th of June or 10th or 15th of June.
There was some camp up there on the
Meeks Bay.
Meeks Bay, right. We stopped there in 43 or 4 on the way home from Montana with all of us in the car. But because Dad had always stayed with you folks up at Meeks Bay.
Yeah, that's where he'd take us up to camp there. That was the greatest spot, I remember one time that Dorothy and I went up there. This was when Lorraine was just a baby. She stayed with her sister.
That little red button there.
No,
There
I
it
think
goes.
it's going.
Now we're on. First of all, a thought that's come to me, I think that it's interesting to just quickly point out. Look at all the people that were in your life and grandmother's life at that time. She had all of her own kids. So she had, I guess, depending on when you talk about it, she had 12 of her own,
Yeah.
plus their children as they began to be born, plus she had her own brothers and sisters, which were what, 5, 6?
5 of them, yeah.
5 of them, including grandmother?
Yeah.
Okay. And her mother was out here for a while, right?
Yeah, sure, she was out here, and she passed away out here just long after I was here, or after we came, yeah.
So I had never, in my mind, realized the spread of the family.
Yeah.
It was a large gang over there in the East LA area, right?
Yeah, right. Incidentally, I always think about my Aunt Doll. Here she was a medical doctor and everything, and she thought things were just the way that they should be, and she married this fellow that had these 3 daughters who had been brought up in Christian Science, and this uncle was her husband was kind of a well, I would just say just a very lax man, and they didn't have any income, and when we lived right across the street from this. In those days, they called it an intermediate school. It's a junior high school now, what they call them. But my mother tried to help her and everything, so she said, "I know a way you can make some money and, pay for your keeps and so forth." And the rent was probably $50 a month. But anyway, she set up a deal on our front yard, in our front porch, and went to the principal of the school over there so the kids could come over there and have their lunch.
I remember.
And
that.
they made I know they must have made servings of Jell-O that wouldn't stop. They always had Jell-O for dessert.
I remember grandmother supplied school lunch, didn't she?
And they set up this deal. Of course, my mother did this out of the goodness of her heart to help them. And they set up this deal, and I can't remember the dishes they had, something like a lasagna or something like that, or the spaghetti and things like that, and meatballs and things like that. And that's how her sister and her husband and these 3 kids existed. And finally, of course, my mother had to pitch right in to help her. But her husband, all he would stand around and I can just see him this day, stand there and smoking a cigar. And just like this, and here my mother was breaking her neck for them to make their 2 ends meet.
I remember that. I don't remember.
Finally, she, it was just such a big hassle, and her husband wasn't helping her. She lived around the corner on Inez Street right there, and so she conceived the idea of letting them serve out of her own house over there. And they arranged with the principal of the school so the kids could go around the corner there to school. But you talk about that, and
Let's try to put a year on that, roughly. Do you remember this personally?
yeah.
So this would be, you were how old then?
Well, your dad was president of the student body over there for a junior high school that just started, so that would have probably been, he would have probably been what, 11 or 12?
So Dad was born in
about the right
98.
age for,
So this is like 1910 then.
I imagine. So if your dad went into service from high school in 11th grade,
7 years later, probably. huh?
7 years later, so. But,
So he must have been around 10 or 11.
and another thing, my mother always used to say, don't say you won't do this and you won't do that. She said, I always said, when the children were growing up, I'll never raise a grandchild. And she lived to bring up 3 of them.
Yeah, right.
Bob Schwartz and Pat Boone.
Plus a hanger-on by the name of Dugan.
Dugan, yeah, right.
So let's move into that,
Yeah.
Jack. If they moved into Heliotrope in roughly, did they move into Heliotrope while Dad was in the Navy, which would have been about 1917, 19?
I think your dad was out of the Navy then, because
he went back to Oxford Street.
Yeah, he was, and then from Oxford to.
And he was at Egler and Musser then at Oxford Street.
Yeah.
And he figured out that Oxford Street must have been about 1918, 1919,
Yeah, right.
Roughly.
And then we moved to Heliotrope Drive.
1920.
About 1920, yeah. Right.
Okay. So then at Heliotrope, then who bought Heliotrope? Was it grandmother bought it?
Yeah.
With her money. She'd already sold Soda Street.
We didn't, yeah, Soda Street. We never bought that. We rented that house on
Oxford Street.
Yeah,
So then she bought Heliotrope,
yeah.
and into Heliotrope moved grandmother, and the oldest child to live there was probably Willard. Was he living there?
No, he wasn't. And your dad and Imogene and Marion and myself.
So 4 of her kids.
Yeah. And Dugan, of course, just about that time went into the, he came out of the, what do they call it, the merchant marine, and went on his own. So that was just a bunch of us that were home. Incidentally, we had Uncle Claire move in with us twice.
when he
got fed up with Fanny, he'd move in. And there's another thing. Your dad was such a sweetheart. He'd get a truck from Agler and Mustard and go over to to Claire's house with a truck, and we'd load all his junk on our thing and bring his dogs over there. You know, he had Russian wolf.
Oh, I remember those.
And he'd move in with us over there at Heliotrope Drive, and then they'd patch things up, and then your dad would haul him right back over there.
How long
And
did he
lasted
stay?
maybe for about a year or less than that, and he moves back in with us. And the next time when he left, Claire had met a gal down at the bus stop there at Wilton and Wilshire, and that kind of cinched it right then. He ran off with this gal, Mary, the one that finally.
Is that right? Is that the one he married?
Yeah.
Now, what was his relation with Bullocks? Was he going with the Bullock's daughter? Was he going to marry the Bullock?
No. He just
Well,
Mr. Bullock just took a liking to him and
Made him a buyer, right?
made him a buyer, and he was a buyer of 5 departments there before he was 21. Imagine that. This guy was just a genius. And he used to go to Europe and New York.
He took Dad to New York with him, didn't he?
Yeah, right.
Dad,
He went with Uncle Ron.
Uncle Raw.
Uncle Ron. Yeah.
But I thought he went with Claire too, didn't he?
I don't think so.
Oh,
I
okay.
think,
Dad, I think he made at least 2 trips with Rawl, didn't he?
yeah. I never got to take one. When he got around to me, he died. But he used to take. He took Marion one time, and
Is that right?
and Imogene another time, and once in a while he'd take a woman friend of friends of ours, and she'd go too. We always accused him of
Hanky
fooling
panky.
around. Yeah, hanky panky. That deal. Probably take Marion or Imogene along. Supposed to be chaperone. Those are just kids, We just get a kick.
And
out.
would this have been when Dad came out of the Navy then? And he was.
Oh, he was out of the Navy then.
So Dad would go with him then when he was a little older then. But
Yeah, he was working for Agler and Musher then.
So we're talking 20 to 24, 25.
Probably 20 to 23, 20. Yeah. Right.
Can you imagine what a time it must have been to get on the train and go to New York in
Yeah.
1922, the Big Apple?
I think I touched on the deal there because your dad was living home with us there, and I had a Ford that Frank gave me, and your dad was home that morning, and of course I went out to go to school. Your dad was going to make some call. I guess I told you about that.
Go ahead, I don't think I got it.
Anyway, he was going to make some call adjacent to Hollywood there where we were, and I got to go to school, and I couldn't get my car started. And this old Ford I had, and of course in those days, if you had a car, you were really something else,
King Kong.
Yeah, and so your dad says, Red, he says, when I come home tonight, he says, I'm going to take you over and buy you a new Ford. And by gosh, we went over on Western Avenue there to this Ford agency, and I'll never forget that deal. We sat down there, and he walked in, and of course he had to buy it on time payments and everything. He bought me this new Ford, and that was really a blessing. Wasn't that something how he did that? And,
Was it a Model T?
it was a
Model A?
A, I guess.
Model A?
Model A, yeah.
We're talking 20, 21, 22 Model A?
Yeah, probably that. Probably about a 1921 or 22 model. Yeah. I tell you, wasn't that something? And he'd do anything in the world for me, boy.
Jack, when did Rawl buy here? Did he build that beach house down at
Topanga Canyon?
Topanga Canyon?
Yeah, he built that down there, yeah.
He did build it.
Yeah.
Boy, that was a vacation spot for the whole family for years, wasn't it?
And they had this house down there, and they built the thing, of course, to the idea of a lot of people every weekend or weekends if they could, and they built it with well, like almost like stalls for bedrooms, you know.
I remember the stalls.
Bunk beds in it, and
Bunk beds. They were
yeah, I guess just those days they just had two tiers.
Two tiers, right.
Yeah, but you could entertain, you know, 12 or 15 people in the thing. It had a beautiful big kitchen and living room. It's right there where Topanga comes into the ocean, and just a little bit north of that, maybe 300 or 400
How far
feet.
north of Malibu is this?
Well, that's south of Malibu.
South of Malibu.
South of
Oh,
Malibu,
for
right
heaven's
Topanga Canyon.
I remember this house so well.
Where Topanga comes
I've
in
never
there,
heard of
and it's a scroungy neighborhood, yeah, but then the good houses start in pretty soon after that. But that was...
It was right on the beach.
Yeah, right on the
It
beach.
was built of tongue and groove board on frame.
It was built up.
Had no interior walls.
It was built up about that high off the sand, you know, so if the tide came in, it could go under there, which I don't know. I don't remember him doing that. But he was sure a great
The
guy.
wiring was all exposed on insulators.
Oh yeah, sure.
And it had those rotary switches.
Yeah.
And the kitchen and the living room and the fireplace were all in one huge, big, high room. It was
Yeah.
beautiful. Oh, it was beautiful.
Who do you remember being out there? Who would go out?
Oh, the whole extended family was out there. We lived there, you know, when Jack was born. I don't know who took care of us, but we were out there when Mother went to the hospital or nursing home to have Jack. And I remember somebody came and picked us up and took us back to Plymouth Boulevard.
Yeah, and then my mother went over there and stayed with you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right, yeah.
But we were down at Malibu often in the summertime for weeks at a time.
Because, you know, in those days you didn't have air conditioning, you know, in town. And if you just worshiped the beach in those days, you know, and they were so gracious in allowing all of us to come down there.
We spent weeks down there.
He was the kind of a guy, this Dr. Ron French, he was such a guy that he would take over like up at Arrowhead. He'd take up their lodge plus the cabins they had around there and probably have maybe 50 of us up there and foot the bill for the whole thing. Sir, have bus transportation for us and everything like that.
Wow.
He took us all to Catalina, I know at least 2 times. He had, in those days, the St. Catherine Hotel, which was plush. Before that, though, he took us to
In
the
Avalon
Tent
over
City.
there?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
took us to Tent City, and then St. Catherine's after that was built. You know, that cost him a lot of money. And say, incidentally, talking about Christian Science, I don't know whether you want to take this or not, but anyway, you know, Wrigley's, you know, were Christian Scientists.
P.K. Wrigley?
Yeah,
The gum?
the gum guy.
Is that right?
And when he built the casino, well, anyway, get back a little further. You're not recording this, are you?
So I've been watching it more.
Okay, we're back on.
Yeah.
Jack, in Heliotrope, okay, there were 4 of you kids, at least, plus Claire drifting in and out from time to time. And then at some point, Pat and Bill showed up when their mother passed away, right?
Yeah.
And then Bob Schwartz showed up, right?
Yeah, so
Would-
that's the 3 grandchildren she had to bring up.
Right, right. And then Dugan, the story that I loved, and I don't know if it was on the original tape or not, but Mr. Bullock called grandmother and asked him to.
Well, this was way back at Soto Street.
Oh, it was? I thought that was
that was
Heliotrope.
way back at Soto Street. Mr. Bullock, of course, was very close to our family because Claire was, you know, growing up there with him, and for a while, Monroe, the 3rd boy, worked in the advertising department for Mr. Bullock. So the family was real close. And Mr. Bullock always said to my mother, if you want to invest any money, invest it on 7th Street. And of course, she thought that was crazy. And so she bought property out different places like on 51st Place where Oscar lived and so forth. But just think what if she'd have put some money in some of that property downtown.
Downtown.
Yeah.
I'll be
But
back.
you started to tell me something there, or ask me something there. Oh, I interrupted to tell you about that Christian Science for Wrigley's.
Well,
Dugan, you wanted to know.
I'm just trying to make sure that I didn't realize Dugan was over at Soto Street, so let's, excuse me, let's clear
That's
that
where
up.
I came, yeah.
And Bullock called grandmother, and he had been somewhat abused by his aunt that he was living
Yeah, I
with.
think I told you that.
He was an orphan, right?
Yeah, and his aunt lived out there way out on West Washington, and she made him walk back and forth to downtown. Can you imagine that? In those days, a nickel was a car fare. She wouldn't let him do it. And one time going home, he was walking home, and he opened his paycheck, or the money in the paycheck, and took out a nickel, I guess it was, and bought a bag of popcorn. And when he got home out there, his aunt found out that he'd spent some money out of his pay envelope, and so she made him go to bed without dinner, and then the next morning for breakfast, she wouldn't give him breakfast, and he had to go to work without any food. And that was when Mr. Bullock, Mr. Bullock had 2 daughters, and Harry lived in a beautiful big home out there in the west side of L.A., and he could have taken them in just as well as now, but he said, well, you know how to handle boys and children like that. He says, you take him in. I guess he was just a kid about
14.
14, yeah.
What year was this now? So if they're still on Soto, I thought,
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought it was heliotrope, but if it was
Oh,
on
no, that was
Soto,
Soda Street.
then it had to be pre-World War I then, right?
Yeah, right. I'll never forget seeing that little beaming kid with a shopping bag, like, deal, bringing these old whirly goods in there. And Claire had brought him home from work, and here he came beaming in. Boy, he was just beaming all over. They're going into a nice home, And
So then
he and your dad and Shine, see, we're at the 3 group right together. He was between your dad and Shine.
I see. So Dugan, if we're talking before World War I, like 1914 or 1915 or something like that, probably.
Yeah.
Then when did Dugan go into the Merchant Marine then, right?
He went into Merchant Marine, and your dad went into the Navy.
At the same time?
Yeah.
Oh, 1917 we're probably.
Well, I guess it was the war started in
I think America got in the First World War in 1917.
1970. That's what my recollection was too.
And so Dad probably got drafted or
Well, he volunteered because he wanted. He was smart. He says, "I'll have a place to sleep every night and won't have to."
if I'm in the Navy.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Dugan went into the Merchant Marine, and then he came out then at the same time, roughly? He came out when?
Well, I bet about the same time your dad got out of the Navy.
Okay.
But then he didn't stay home very much. Then he, went out and lived on his own.
Bob Schwartz remembered Dugan very well because apparently Dugan had a drinking problem later on, and Bob remembers having to go on heliotrope.
Yeah, Bob was living in St. Heliotrope
Yeah, right.
too. Yeah.
Jack, let's try to move on then to we're all at heliotrope, and it's 1920. Dad is working for Agler and Musser still.
Yeah. Agler and Musser.
Yeah, right. 21. And then at what point did Willard? So Willard got a dealership with the Schwinn people?
Yeah, well, the people that had this agency out here, they had the exclusive for the 6 western states. And somehow or other, they just latched on to Willard, and we called him Shine. And they were well fixed themselves, but this little business was getting too much for them, and all they did is just operate. They didn't try to promote sales or anything like that. And so Shine went to work for them
As a salesman?
as a salesman, and they hadn't had any salesmen up to this point. And so he went to work for them, and they really took a liking to him. And they said, like I say, they were getting along, so they didn't want to work anymore. So they just said, "What, wouldn't you like to have this business?" or words to that effect. So they signed everything over to him, but they worked with him for about a year, I think, to help him out. And they had a very close friend. This fella was a buddy of theirs, and he was an old bachelor, and we always got a kick out of him. And he'd been working with them, and so he stayed on then with Willard in the business. Well, they were running the business, and they had about that time they had a man working in the office for him, and right about this time, Shine's wife passed away, and of course then she was in the.
What was her name?
Nellie.
Nellie.
She'd been in a sanitarium out in San Dimas or someplace out there and passed away. So my mother had the kids, so that's how she fell into taking care of those kids. And then about this time, this man in the office, we used to, just out of curiosity, so we'd go down there, your dad and I would go down there and get down there, and this guy was running around with a big roll of bills in his pocket like that, with some change or something. And, well, I'll never forget that your dad says to me, he says, "Did you see that?" And I said, "I sure did." And he said, "Well, let's kind of watch out for this deal." Well, anyway, he wasn't banking the money, he was just, taking care of it himself. And so finally we got wise to it, and of course my mother was concerned about the business too. That's when his wife had passed away, and she said, my mother said, "You better go down," well, after your dad and I talked about it, "you better go down there and help him." So I went down there.
So your mother said that to Dad?
Yeah.
Or
well, and then of course your dad was still working for Aguilar and Musser.
So we're talking, Dad was married in, Dad married Mother in what, 26, 20?
I think about 26.
I was born in 28, so I think
Yeah,
they
was about
were married
26.
a couple of years before I was
Yeah.
born. So I'm trying to tie all this together. So when did Willard, can you pick a time frame when Willard went into business with these people? Was it in the early 20s?
Well, that would be the early 20s, yeah. I guess it would probably be about 1920.
So Dad, then Willard had this business for a little while?
For about maybe 6 months, because your dad didn't want
I
to
remember
quit
this.
Aguilar and Musser and leave them in the lurch and everything. So finally, then he came in with me, and I think
Was that before he was married?
I think it was just about the time your dad got married. It might have been just a little before, yeah.
So we're talking 1925, 1926, and Dad then joined you and Willard in the business.
Yeah, so we worked in it. We put the thing on a good, sound business basis. Fortunately, your dad and I, in school, had taken what they used to call a business course, and you took bookkeeping and typing and mathematics and things like that pertaining to business. Fortunately, that's the way it worked. So your dad and I had an experience in
That Willard never
bookkeeping.
had, yeah.
Yeah, and Willard didn't have a bit of that, so.
So we're in 1925, 26 roughly, and you three fellows are there, and then Dugan joined you at some point later, or?
Well, we sold the state of California, their first highway patrol motorcycles. I think it was an order for 300 of them. And
That's a big
so
order.
what we had to do, we opened an agency in San Diego and put Dugan down there to run that place, and a mechanic with him. And I remember a couple of times we went down there, and one time your dad especially went down there, and Dugan wasn't there. Like, well, it'd have to be about 10 o'clock in the morning maybe, or 8:30 to 10 o'clock, and he'd get down there, and Dugan didn't open up the place. The mechanic was the one that was opening up the place. He was probably sleeping, until noon. And finally we got wise to that thing and pulled the plug on him. And he went to work for somebody, I don't know. Who.
Dugan did?
Yeah,
Because I've seen pictures of you, Dad, and Willard, and Dugan.
yeah.
4 of you in suits and ties.
Right. Anyway,
So when did you open up your Pasadena store?
we didn't have one in Pasadena. We had one in San Diego, and one out in Colton. Maybe that's the one you got.
Maybe I'm thinking of it.
Colton took care of Riverside, San Bernardino. Well, the Highway Patrol didn't have any service deal, so we had to service all these motorcycles around, see. And so that's how.
You had a mechanic?
Yeah, mechanic did all the work. We didn't do any, so.
Nothing in Pasadena, huh?
No.
I thought I distinctly heard something in Pasadena.
Well, no, wait a minute. We did have one in Pasadena. We had that one in Colton, and that wasn't taking care of Pasadena, Alhambra, and the valley there. So we had that place in Pasadena. You're right, there. It was on Green Street. I remember now. Yeah.
I remember that, yeah, Green Street.
Yeah.
And who ran that one for you?
Well, we just had a mechanic over there,
I
and
see.
one of the fellows that was a.
So at this time, what was it called, the business? Was it called?
Kemp Brothers.
Kemp Brothers, right.
Yeah.
And it was down on Main Street.
We were on Main Street when we took that over from the people, because they were on 9th and Bixel when this couple had it. At 9th and Bixel, just store building in there, and it was not adequate. So then we went over onto Main Street and leased this place over there, and which was a greater business district anyway.
And what was that address on Main Street?
1116.
1116.
Yeah, and about that time we sold City of Los Angeles 50 motorcycles, and I'll never forget that deal. The traffic department, the man that was in charge of it, was a very good friend of ours. And
We have to stop now, Jack.
you came down there, and she'd take them down on the beach. And of course, we lived back a little ways, or rented a house back a little ways. She went down there and everything. And I always remember the two little kids ran out into the water, and my mother got so excited and everything, she ran right out in the water after them, Here of course, she wouldn't have any bathing suit or anything, she'd just have her clothes. She just ran out there, and boy, she grabbed you two kids like that.
And whip them back.
Boy, your feet were out in the air. Boy, I
Jack,
always remember that.
Anaheim Landing, Mrs. Klein, or Mrs. Can you remember, was Anaheim Landing, did that get renamed Seal Beach?
See, it's, yeah, right there,
And was it Imogene's friend, Mrs. Klein, or
yeah.
it's near,
I think, yeah.
sounds like Klein.
I think it was Anaheim Landing, but when you come down through Huntington Beach, you've been down there, and you pass the naval deal there, and you go over a little bridge, and then you start coming down in through the little town there, and then it was right on the right-hand side there.
It used to be called Anaheim Landing.
Yeah, and of course it's part of Huntington Beach, I guess now, or Sunset Beach.
No, it's north of that, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's right down in there. And
Is it?
yeah, the funny part of this deal, this gal that owned the house, we always had a shaky feeling about a relationship with Lauren, Imogene's husband, and this gal.
I
Were
love it.
real good friends.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But I remember we'd go down to her house often,
Yeah.
and I guess, and all the kids, and I remember Dad taking me out in the surf, and a big wave hitting us, and him losing me.
That was down at Hermosa Beach.
You
That was
sure?
that was at Hermosa Beach.
But everybody was on the beach.
Yeah,
Lauren Jr., Bob Schwartz, Billy Kemp.
yeah. That wasn't at her house.
It wasn't at her house.
No, because she just would just maybe have a couple come down and something like that. But we went
But I
out
remember
for-
being at her house.
Yeah, well, that was
I never liked to go there for some reason. I couldn't.
Hermosa Beach. I have to tell you another story right there, quick like. In those days, you had thermos bottles, and you take your drinks down in thermos bottles and stuff like that. We had one that had 4 thermos bottles in it. We went down to Hermosa Beach to spend the day, and I went down and it was Kai, and I don't think Clara came down, but anyway, Kai was there, and you know, in those days, you know, men used to wear a bathing suit up around their neck.
Yeah, they look like a tank top.
I'll never forget this deal. If I lived to be 100,000 years old, he went over and he wanted to play a trick on your dad. He went over there and took one of these thermos bottles out, and thinking it was one that had ice water in it and had coffee in it. And your dad was sitting there on the beach, and he went over and pulled the back of his bathing suit out like that and poured his damn coffee down his back. Oh man, I could
That
feel
hurts.
that, and I can still feel it. Can you imagine doing that? And then your dad took off there, boy, and he ran around, almost got the Catalina. Can you imagine a dumb thing like that? He thought they had the one with ice water in it with coffee in it. That's Uncle Kai. Of course, he didn't come very often with us like that. Isn't that something? Then how things stand out like that to you?
Sure. So let's get back to
Yeah.
Kemp Brothers.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're in the mid-20s.
Yeah.
And Dad and you and Willard are in business. Dugan, erstwhile in business, down in San Diego, but left because he goofed.
Yeah, right. So we finally closed up that place down there and closed the one in Pasadena. And went out and
As the Depression got tougher.
well, as the
Oh, wait a minute, we're in the 20s, I'm sorry, Depression.
as long as the business got organized and the state could service their motorcycles, that was the main thing. See, that was the reason we did that. But
You're actually pretty successful at this point.
oh yeah, sure. We had a
Making money.
nice business going, you know.
Making money.
And then so finally, Shine went to work for Schwinn, and was working for Schwinn and
As their regional
as our
manager.
regional manager for the 6 western states.
And you and Dad were running the
And
business.
we were running the business then.
And you were still at 1116 Main Street.
We're right there, yeah. And we had to go, to get into this deal. We got to find out, you know, this guy, a bookkeeper and so forth. They were pulling shenanigans on deals. You know, you sell a motorcycle on a contract, and then you take that contract and you go to a finance company and discount it. They sell it at a discount price. And this guy down there was going over to this finance company financing, and then he'd take over here and he'd take a copy of the thing over here and do another finance company and finance there. So he had 2 obligations against this one motorcycle. Of course, everything was sold on contracts in those days. And about this time was when Shine went to work for the factory. And here, when we got into that thing, this thing was $40,000 in debt. Well, $40,000 in those days is like $1 million today. And here, your dad and I had to pay this off. Well, we were paying them off at these different finance companies, $50 and $75 and $100 a week. You know.
Whatever happened to the guy that did this?
Well, we fired him in a hurry. But
Didn't he go to jail or?
We didn't know. I guess our attorney was old Mac Ferries. You know, he said,
McIntyre Ferris.
why waste your time and money on doing that? So, but that's how we started out, with a $40,000 load over our head, and we finally got out of it.
A lot of money.
Yeah, and of course, we had a good time. And one note I have in here, there was never one time, and we were in business together for what, 30 years or so.
At least.
We never had one crossword or any discordant deal all those years. Even when we got into the trucking business, we never had one hesitation.
That's wonderful. Jim.
Yeah, but that's something.
That's wonderful to look back on, you know that?
You see, I guess I told you how we were stuck with these. Well, we weren't stuck. We were in a business of selling used and new motorcycles. Well, then finally Schwinn closed up the motorcycle business, and I think I put in the tape there about that friend of your mother's, really your granddad Pope. This man that lived down in Long Beach didn't have any place to go, and he was retired, and he didn't have a car, and he and his wife lived in a little apartment down in Long Beach. And so what he would do, and of course he just took a liking to us, and he'd come up there about at least 3 days a week and take the streetcar and come up and sit around our office there and see how things going, and then he'd go home. Well, about this time, when Schwinn was going to close up, I don't know whether I told that on the other tape.
No, you didn't.
Schwinn was closing up this plant, and so this fellow would come over and see us, just spend the time around our place around there. And he said to your dad, he says, why don't you guys buy that thing? Well, here, we never knew he had a dime. And so we talked it over and everything. And the next morning he came back up, which was unusual. One day right after that, he came back the next morning. And he says, why don't you guys buy that thing? He says, I'll back you on it. And so we had a couple of conversations. Your dad had a couple of conversations with Schwinn, and I guess he didn't think, that we had any money to be able to do it with. So your dad went back there to see him about it, and he said, all we wanted to do was buy the dies and patterns
And the
things like
tooling
that,
and the drawings.
and then move the manufacturing in Los Angeles. And so your dad gets back there, and he says, oh, I sold that to some guy that was the Chicago dealer down there for salvage. And these things are, were priceless, because you'd have to start making all these dies and patterns again and everything. And so when your dad came back, and I guess we didn't use the telephone too much in those days anyway. The next morning this guy came back when he knew your dad was coming back to town, and he told him about that thing, and boy, that guy's chin dropped. Here, we talked about 125,000. Well, that's about equivalent to about 5 million today.
I don't know.
125,000. It would have been a steal for us, and he was willing to back us. Wasn't that something?
What was his name?
Gee, if you hadn't asked me, I probably could have told you. He was a very good friend of your Grandpa Pope.
Is that right?
Way he made his source of money, and was in Montana. He had what they call a strip mine, and his income was something like $50,000 a month, or no, some more than that, a month. And here they just lived in a little apartment down there, and then they'd commute back to Montana and so forth. Imagine that.
Let's put a time frame, Jack. When did Schwinn?
That would have been in 1930.
1930.
Yeah.
Well, that was a busy time. I was born in 28. Mom and Dad were married in 26. You guys were in this motorcycle business, Kemp Brothers, until 30. And then when Schwinn went out of business, why did they go out of business?
Well, they weren't selling the motorcycles. We sold over 3/4 of his production in our territory out here. He had Chicago Police Department, was the main one we had. But with Shine as a salesman around there, we had a...
Selling everybody in sight.
Well, yeah, he could sell a refrigerator to Eskimos, and stuff.
Were you mostly selling to police departments and?
Well, I know the cities back there like Cincinnati or any other places, they weren't pushing it like that. And of course, he's a fellow, if you try to tell him something. Now, one thing we found out about this, kind of technical, but there's a drive shaft in the center of the motor, and we found out by replacing the center shaft, if it had a little vibration in it, it would break those studs off, what they call a stud in there that would hold the bearing there, see? And so when your dad was in the office there one day, a dealer came into him, to Mr. Schwinn, and said, right in front of your dad, he said, Mr. Schwinn, we got to do something about that center bearing stud. Can't we enlarge that, And Mr. Schwinn was just a little guy. He got up from behind his desk and came out of that window and he pushed his fingers in that guy's chest. He says, I got millions. You tell me what to do? He says, I got millions. How much you got? And all we wanted him to do is just put a little bigger stud in there. And we used to do that ourselves down here.
Was this at 1116 Main?
Yeah.
Yeah, you used to do that yourselves. Did you have a big shop in the back with
Yeah,
lathes and
Yeah,
I remember that shop, Jack. It had a motor in the corner, a
Yeah.
big electric, huge motor with giant belts up to
Yeah,
drive shafts in the
shaft,
ceiling,
Yeah.
right?
Run those tools, yeah. Uh-huh.
And
Big air compressor.
have you ever seen an old machine shop, Ann? During the era of the shops in those days had one big motor with a pulley on it that drove a
belt,
big
a belt.
pulley on the ceiling with shafts running all across the ceiling of the shop, and belts would drive all of these shafts, and then down from other pulleys on these shafts being driven by this motor would be belts down to a lathe, to a drill press, to
Grinders and all that.
grinders. And so you'd look into a shop and it would be a kind of a big, I don't know how to, big growing kelp bed of these belts going up to the ceiling, all whirring and turning. And I remember as a little kid, I was just, we're talking 2 or 3 years old, right?
Right. About
When
3,
did you
probably, right.
when did you terminate that shop? Did you always?
Well, we always had a shop, but as modern conveniences came in, we got away from all this
Smaller
overhead
motors.
stuff, and they put a motor on a lathe, like they do now, or like a individual motor for each piece of equipment. See, but that's used to.
You used to see a forest of these belts down,
Yeah.
turning machinery.
And different sizes, see, for different speeds to different things.
So in the front you had a showroom
Yeah, we had a
out
shop.
on Main Street, and then in the back you had the shop.
We had the shop, then we had some offices in between and the parts department over there.
I remember that.
Yeah,
And you had your offices in the middle behind the showroom.
yeah.
Okay. I'm going to have to write this down in my own personal history because you guys had a big two-way intercom called a voice call
Yeah.
between the office and the shop. And I stole that or ended up with it somehow. We
Yeah.
played with it on Plymouth Boulevard for years. I think you were
This guy here had, it was electric wire, he was attached to it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Electric.
And the other thing you had on the wall was a little code sender. You'd turn the knob, and it would transmit over telephone wires to the Western Union office.
Yeah.
And a guy would come out. You'd turn the knob, and the guy would show up an hour later, half an hour later, pick up your telegram, and take it back to the office and send
Then they'd
it.
send it out.
Remember those things on the wall?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. So I don't mean to take up my
No,
time.
that's good, no, I'm
No,
glad.
I remember this vividly. Little teeny kids were running around raising
These
cane.
kids used to have a great time. They'd run into the parts department there, and they'd play in the shell, the shells.
And your parts department was on the other end, next to the driveway, right? You had the driveway in from Main Street.
No, we went around in the alley to get a Main
Oh,
Street.
was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was when we were on Main Street, and they had that big earthquake that hit Long Beach. so
33,
heavy.
1933.
I remember running out, and they always tell you to get in and stand in the doorway, and your dad and I ran right out to the front door and stood there under the front door, and then we had big glass windows in here. We stood underneath there, and you could see that, had the streetcar tracks in there, you could see that pavement just do like that. Now that wasn't exaggerated, it wasn't, it was a fact, with that pavement just rolling like that.
I was 5 years old. Tom was 3. We were in Plymouth Boulevard, and it was in the late afternoon, and we had a nurse, Ruth. Do you remember the
Yeah.
nurse? We were inside the house, and the earthquake started. The nurse went ballistic, and she just lost it. Mother grabbed the nurse, Ann grabbed Tommy, and I ran out ahead of them. We ran out the side door and down the driveway, and the driveway was 2 ribbons of concrete with grass in the middle
Yeah.
and on each side, and I could see the driveway going like this. We ran right out in the middle of Plymouth Boulevard,
Yeah.
Oh,
and the street just cracked all over the place. The street just broke up.
Not as bad as they have been around here lately.
Oh, right. Well, that was a big one, though.
Oh, yeah, I'll say.
Because I remember who took the movies. I remember a whole flock of 16mm home movies of the Long Beach quake that we had in the family all the way through the
Oh, yeah.
30s or 40s. Did you take those?
No, I didn't know. So somebody
Well,
must have taken.
Claire had a camera. Jim
Yeah,
Pope
maybe.
had a camera. It showed Long Beach just laying flat on the ground. Brick chimneys all
Big
around.
buildings, gosh.
As a result of that, why Van Ness Avenue Grammar School was condemned. And they put tents out in back, and we went to school in tents all the way through junior high and high school.
Speaking of Van Ness School, do you remember how you folks met the Woods family?
No.
Anyway, they went over to they were having a child's show in the little auditorium, and his mother and dad sat next to this couple, and their little daughter was going to be in a presentation too, and he was going to be in a presentation. And of course, the two couples picked up a conversation and wound up to be a real relationship.
Was this down in the Philharmonic in L.A.?
No, this was just at the school.
Van Ness Avenue, in the
Yeah.
auditorium.
Right, in the auditorium. Those days they had an auditorium at the school. And they were close friends for years. George passed away, and then Julia passed away just a
Yeah,
few
but
years.
this was we were close friends.
Yeah, for years. They
up
were.
until high school, up until college.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's something. And of course, the girl, she was always crazy about Paul Jr. Remember Marilyn?
Oh,
Was that her
shucks,
name,
Jack.
Marilyn?
Maryland.
I shouldn't talk about that.
Mimi.
should I? She's still around. You know?
Oh yeah, she's down here in Church, isn't she?
Yeah.
Let's go back, and you guys, let's talk about the transition now, the Kemp brothers into California delivery service. So, if the Schwinns went out of business in 1930, you were still in the motorcycle business, and you had all this inventory, did you, of stuff, or what?
Well, we had used motorcycles. The way we got into that delivery business was, there was a young fellow that was trying to make a living, and he would run errands or have fellows do it with him, and somebody would want some special part, like over in the north part of Los Angeles on the way to Pasadena or things like that. They'd call up this guy, and he'd get the parts and send this fellow out with his motorcycle and give him some fast service. Well, anyway, this fellow built up a pretty good little business, and so we, as a courtesy, try and help him. We used to let our girl in the office take his telephone calls when he wasn't there. Well, this fella had somebody lose a very valuable shipment of some valuable parts for some car, and he just took off and never came back. And this girl of ours was taking these orders, and she would send these fellows out on these errands. And this thing went on like that, and gosh, we thought, well, gee, why can't we do something like that? Kind of take this business over. Maybe someday this guy will come back or something like that. But anyway, we did that, and he didn't come back for quite a while. And so we got to taking this deal over, and the business got so good we finally had to put sidecars on the motorcycles.
Wow.
And then the word got around with these auto parts companies, repair companies and so forth. These calls kept coming in, like from Long Beach and Pasadena and all around. And I always remember one time the motorcycle was all loaded for the Pasadena trip, like at 4:30 in the afternoon, I think, with the trip. We used to give such fast service that United Parcel started at two trips a day for delivery.
To compete with you.
To compete with us. They saw that same deal. Well, anyway, this guy that was supposed to take this trip to Pasadena, and they had a lot of people, they really relied on you for these parts, you know. And so this guy said, well, I'm not going to start in this rain or something, you know. And I said, give me that damn thing, I'll tell you. And I put on a pair of coveralls and no helmet or no hat, no windshield those days.
And I jumped on the motor?
I jumped on the motor and took that load on the trip to Pasadena. The thing was all loaded. These things were getting real big loads.
No, you had little van bodies alongside of a motorcycle, didn't you?
On one side.
It wasn't a sidecar. It was
a sidecar.
It was a. I remember a near truck body type thing alongside the motor, right?
Well, that was these sidecars we put on there. And a sidecar in those days was just mainly for a passenger to ride in. That's maybe where you got that idea. And we used those to start with, but those things weren't any good, so we made flatbeds out of the sidecars. Anyway, I took that trip to Pasadena, and this is at 4 o'clock when I left, and I took the load over there and got through, and I called your dad over there, and it seemed like about 15 minutes. Anyway, I says, I'm all through. He says, you're through already? I said, yeah. I said, well, I'm coming back. And here I took the thing back, and that guy refused to take that run over there. He was still hanging around there, but boy, he sure felt chagrined. Well, anyway, we finally got that business going.
What year was that, Jack? 30, roughly?
That would have probably been about 1933, I guess, 34, 35.
Country was starting into the Depression at this point.
Yeah, and this thing used to get so big that we had to finally. Well, we didn't have any money, and in fact, trucks were hard to buy in those days. We bought a bunch of two-door Ford sedans.
You're talking about during the war, though, but that's a little later.
Yeah.
But you operated with maybe
motorcycles, yeah.
all the way from the time that Schwinn went out of business up until you bought your first Ford pickup trucks in 37. They were all 37 Fords. Right?
Yeah.
Did you buy them in 38 or 38?
Well, first we had to buy these used sedans because trucks were so hard to get hold of. And then we finally bought, like you say, in about 1947, was it?
No, I'm speaking of in the 30s. You had a fleet of 7 panel trucks, didn't you?
Yeah.
You bought those in 37?
Yeah. Well,
So you operated with motorcycles up until the time you bought the trucks.
Yeah, of course, we still had used motorcycles for smaller loads too.
Did you?
Yeah. But we were going all around, say within 25 miles of Los Angeles, and giving them 3 trips a day. And United Parcel were so hipped on us. In those days, you couldn't do anything without a permit and a license. Well, we didn't have any permits or licenses to this, and of course, this was making an impression on them, and so they filed suit against us. And it's called the Public Utilities Commission now. And United Parcel, one of the vice presidents used to come over there and take pictures of our motorcycles with the loads going out of there and the trucks going out of there, because we were making a dent on them. And that would have been about 1937 and 38, and we went through really.
You were still on Main Street, weren't you?
Yeah, we were still on Main Street then, yeah, because at the alley ended right there at 11th and Main, and this United Parcel guy would stand over there and back here, and the shop windows over here, so he could look over there and see when the motorcycle was coming out of our building, and then he'd step out around there and take pictures of it.
Well, whatever happened to that suit then that they brought against
Went
him?
on for a long time.
A long time,
It was a long
yeah.
time, and then
sure.
how did it get resolved?
Big worry, big
Well,
worry.
we finally got a permit to do it with motorcycles only.
Oh.
And that was unheard of getting a permit against United Parcel, because they had their finger on everything, and the truck lines and everything was all regulated. You could only do certain things at certain places and certain times. We didn't know anything about all these laws and everything, and they'd drag us into these hearings just like a court hearing and put us through the works. Well, here, Pete, his dad, and we were just, inexperienced as far as the transportation is concerned, and they get us up on the stand, and this Mr. Ferries, who was our
McIntyre
attorney,
Ferries.
yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, he only passed away just a few years ago.
Is that right?
Anyway, they'd get us up on the stand, and ask us all these technical questions, well, gosh, your dad and I didn't know all these darn things and everything. And they'd rake us over the coal. They had the Southern Pacific Railroad, Santa Fe, all these big outfits were converging on us. They had people from San Francisco come down, you know, they'd get us on the stand there and just put us through the ropes. And I always remember your dad, one time they asked him some term or something, you know. Dad says, I don't know. And old Mac Ferries, this attorney we had, he'd sit there in the courtroom and put his head back like this, just laugh, you know, have a good smile on his face all the time when they'd be cross-examining either one of us, you know. And he'd just sit there and just smile again. Of course, that would be a boost to us to think Mac Ferries was doing it. But anyway,
He was prominent, wasn't he?
yeah, this fellow Mac Ferries, when we got all through this and got our permit, boy, after they had their hearing, it took maybe a month or two to get the decision from San Francisco. And every time the mailman would come in, we'd always think, boy, here's going to be our decision. Well, finally, it came through that Ferry's office, got his copy first, and I had your dad on the phone. He said, what do you think, Pete? He called him Pete. What do you think, Pete? We got our permit. And it was the only one that had ever been issued against United Parcel.
For motorcycles.
For motorcycle, that was exclusion. Well, in the meantime.
Because you went through this again in the 50s to get a radio highway common carrier permit, didn't you?
Yeah, but then right about that time, they eased all this deal. You could do anything you wanted to and go anywhere. We couldn't go on first, you know, Rosemead Boulevard out in East LA area. We couldn't go on the east side of that. That's how strict the law was. You could go on this side because that's where our permit was there. And for instance, San Fernando Valley, of course, we were pretty smart in one respect. We took the cream of the crop here, see? And we go out, we could take San Fernando Valley as far as Calabasas and that deal, and over to Foothill Boulevard in Pasadena. Well, who the heck wanted to go up further in the mountains? But we had this cream of the crop here. See?
All the way around the
all the way
basin.
around,
Yeah.
see, but it went out east to Rosemead Boulevard. And they had an inspector on us one time that came out and would go through our tickets to watch us, you know. And this fellow found one on Rosemead Boulevard, a certain number, you know. And I always remember he took that into your dad, and your dad was talking on the telephone, so he said, well, ask Jack about that. So the guy came over to me and said, what about this? 3141 Rosemead Boulevard or something like that. I said, that's on the west side of the street. He said, the hell it is. I said, you check it and see. And boy, I got a map out there and it showed him, this is the inspector, you know, just like an IRS on your throat, you know. And my gosh, it was on the west side of the street. And he thought he really had us there, you know. But fortunately, as things went on, they eased these restrictions. Now you can do anything you want. You can go to San Francisco or whatever you want to do. But,
Okay, so you're in the motorcycle business during the early and the mid 30s,
Yeah.
well, late 20s and 30s, and is it correct to say that you began to make your transition into the trucking business in 1937 when you bought
well,
trucks?
a little before that.
A little before.
For that, because yeah, it was closer to when we were using used motorcycles there for about, well, maybe 1935 along in there.
36.
Yeah. And another interesting thing was when we had to go into buying trucks, there was a Ford dealer out in Huntington Park that happened to be, this is about the time your dad had taken class, and in the transition here where we had to have trucks, your dad went to Mr. King
I remember that.
and made arrangements with him where he gave us a very good price, see, because they were association members. And he was a blind man. Did you know that, Mr.
No,
King
I
was?
never knew
Yeah,
that.
he was a blind man. And so he and your dad, well, I guess he lost his sight just about the time after he had class or when your dad had, see. But he used to give us a very good price on trucks and a very good terms too that we could buy them. Wasn't that a nice working out?
Terrific.
Yeah.
Jack, when did times turn really tough? for you guys.
Well, what is that? What was that depression about 38, wasn't it?
No, the Depression started
Oh,
in
28.
28, well,
Yeah.
the crash happened in 29, and things began to get really serious for the country in 31, 30, 31, 32, 33.
Right. I guess maybe Schwinn must have known that was going to happen or something because he got out of the business about that time. But things.
So it was economic reasons that he quit the motorcycle.
Well, that was one of the things. Yeah.
Okay. Remember I told you one time that I remember the sheriff, I remember waking up at night.
I always hate to hear you tell that story.
Do you? Is that painful?
Oh, it was painful as hell, I'll tell you that. Yeah, I went to repossess his house.
Little kid, and the doorbell rang, and I jumped out of bed and ran out. And the porch light, Dad turned on the porch light, and this uniformed deputy was standing there with this paper in his hand. And I remember talking, and Dad said, "Well, you can take it.
Yeah,
Take the house."
I always hate to hear that story.
So that was what, 31?
I guess about 31, yeah. And anyway, Uncle Claire stepped in at that time and made arrangements for a loan to be put on the property. And
He guaranteed the loan, huh?
Uncle Claire at that time was the nicest guy. He came down to our shop one day, and when we moved over on Santee Street, we were able to buy this lot and build this building just the way we wanted it. And next door was a big apartment house. And well, that was a blessing to us because on the other side was a regular shop building. And the people in this apartment here would look after our equipment because we couldn't put them all on trucks in the building. And then that apartment house came up for sale, and Claire says, "Let's buy it and tear it down," and we were going to build our building right out like that, you know. Well, Imogene had brought him down to the shop because he wanted to talk this business deal over, and we decided that that's the way we would go, and he said, "Great." And he'd already gone over to the bank, and you know, on a personal's note.
Jack, what year was this roughly?
This has got to be in 37 or 38, I guess. And he went over to the bank where we banked, and we knew the manager real well. And it was the second largest bank Security had, so you know how big the branch was. Anyway,
Over on Olympic, right?
Olympic and Flower, and he went over there and signed an endorsement on the back of them, 10 notes, and he said to this manager, "Now anything these boys want, you give it to them." Imagine that. Well, anyway, we were making this transition, going to buy this apartment and build our building over there because we were going to town, and Imogene drove him down that day when we had to have this conference about doing that expansion. And it wasn't, they left, and he came in the office and talked to us, Imogene did. When he left with Imogene, he was staying with her. I don't think he was gone, well, say 20 minutes. The telephone rang and he called and he talked to your dad. He said, "Pete," he says, "hold up on that apartment down there." He says, "I don't think we can make it." And here's a guy, you know, he could go to the bank, and of course those days he could borrow $100,000 like nothing, you know. But then you see, she talked him out of helping us do this finance deal. But of course, fortunately, we never had to use any of those notes. Our signature was good enough, we never had to use them. I don't know what happened to them. Anyway.
Jack, you moved from Main Street to
Santee.
Santee, and that you moved in, now I recall that in the showroom on Main Street, you finally put a washing machine guy in there. You rented out the showroom on Main Street, didn't you?
No, not that I remember.
I remember the washing machine. Because I remember I bought Mother, for Christmas one Christmas, I bought her a mangle. I don't know who finally paid for it. I think I had some money, but I bought her I remember Mother got her first semi-automatic drum-type washing machine in like 1940, 41. You remember that? It was a Maytag.
You sure?
No, it was a, what other brand was there?
Hot Point, isn't it?
No, you had a washing machine guy in your front, in the front
You
of your...
did?
Yeah.
Boy, I don't have a
He
bit
had
of
a parts,
recollection.
he had parts bins in the back.
Yeah.
He had washing machines and mangles and commercial mangles. Remember those?
No.
He had great big commercial ironing machines, and he had... I
On
think-
Main Street?
Yeah. Well, I see this is where my memory's a little fuzzy. You had maybe did you move to Santee and the guy in front was a washing machine guy? Did you?
Santee, we built that building.
No, you're talking about Maple, aren't you?
No, that's Santee.
Where'd you-
Santee's right next to Maple.
Okay.
Los Angeles, Santee, and then Maple.
You had three places. One you built yourself at the end,
Yeah, that's the one on Santee Street we built.
but you moved from Main Street to someplace.
To Santee, no.
Okay.
Yeah. We bought this lot over there and financed the building on the thing. And we built this building just to our specifications. We had a great parking lot, our own gas tank and everything in there.
And that was the last place you were, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. You had Main Street, and then you had a building where you had a driveway in the front.
Oh, wait, you're talking about Grand Avenue.
Grand Avenue.
Yeah, that was,
And Grand Avenue was the place where the washing machine guy was in front.
that's where the guy was on the washing machine,
Okay,
yeah,
all
Grand
right.
Avenue, yeah.
Sorry, but
And we had a crane one time land, you know what a crane bird is, you know, land on the edge of our roof up at the top, and the sign on there said California Delivery Service. And the Herald paper, the old newspaper in those days, took a picture of that, showed the crane sitting right over the word delivery.
is that right?
Yeah, did you ever?
I'll be darned.
I wonder where the heck that paper is.
Let's. It's important to get this CDS history down.
Yeah.
Because that's about the time Tom and I and Dick and Jack all begin to really remember everything going on. When did you actually change from Kemp Brothers to California Delivery?
Well, as we got into the delivery business more.
Can you remember a year? Or?
Oh, I have the least idea, but it probably was, in late 30s, I would think.
Because you bought trucks in '37,
Yeah.
so it was roughly.
Then we had to have some name, so we picked out the word California Delivery Service.
Then when did you move from Main Street to Grand Avenue?
Oh, you are taxing my brain. We had to have more space than we had on Main Street, and so we moved over to Grand Avenue.
Let me jog your memory a little bit this way. At the time that the war started, which would have been 41, 42, your trucks were inadequate for all you were trying to do. So you bought those stripped down Model A's from, was it King out in Huntington
yeah.
Park? Because I remember you bought several of those. At the end of the war, I got one as my first car. But during the war, they were Model A sedans with all the upholstery and all the seats ripped out except the driver's seat, and you used those for trucks.
Yeah.
And can you remember when you picked those up? Was it 42?
Well,
40?
then from those things, we were able to buy these trucks then because, they'd ration those out to dealers.
After the war.
Yeah. And this, Mr. King, I was telling you, his association, remember, got us in his allotment of these trucks, and they were, what were those half-ton panels, weren't they, to start with?
Yeah.
They were real great.
With a little V8 engine in them, a little
V6.
90 or 120.
Yeah. Little V6.
Well, so moving to Grand Avenue was a big step because it was a great big barn of a place inside, with a driveway off of Grand and a driveway onto
12th Street.
12th Street. And that's where all of us began. That's where up the street, why Mrs. Nussbaum had her.
Yeah. And you'll get a kick out of this. That's a place on Grand Avenue, and our bank was over on Figueroa Street. And Grand Avenue was quite a popular street, and up that street about between 9th and 10th, it was 9th and Olympic, was a place that was a dance hall at one time, and they turned it into a bowling alley. Well, the boys were working for us too, you know, at that time, and so Tom took his load out. I don't know where he was going to Pasadena or out in the valley or something. Tom took his load out, and I was going to the bank, and the bank was at Olympic Street, 10th Street. But I guess I must have been thinking about it something. I drove right on past Olympic, because we used to go over Olympic to the bank that way. We went up there, and here's one of our trucks parked out in front of this bowling alley. And I says, for God's sake, who can that be? And so I snuck in the front, and here was Tom with bowling. And so I just snuck into the seats, you know, at the end of the aisle of the bowling alley. You know, they had these little score pads and visitors permit seating there, you know, just two little stands or something. I snuck in there and I sat down at the scoring table, you know, and Tom threw a ball in it. Of course, he didn't see me. He threw a ball in it and made a strike. And I turned around and I said, "Wow, a strike!" You know, he turned around. He could have gone right down through that. Remember that?
I'll never forget it.
And another thing I got to tell you about was one time Jack, over on Figueroa Street with these big automobile agencies, and one of them was the Buick agency, Howard Buick Company, and you had to drive around the circular floor driveway to get up to the parts department where we'd make our pickups, you know. And so Jack was coming down there one day, and you come down one side, it was room enough for two cars, closely anyway, wasn't it? Anyway, and he didn't have his door shut tightly. And when he went to turn around the corner like that, the door opened, and of course he had to grab the steering wheel, and it rammed into the side here, and got the truck stuck in there across the. Remember that?
No.
Oh, Jack, I just had a hard time to live that down, boy. Then they had a heck of a time, you know, to pull that thing out to get it away. I was thinking about that, was sure.
Jack, let's move back to the 30s, because I distinctly remember Mother taking orders and then phoning them in over the phone from Plymouth Boulevard. Do you remember us doing that at all?
Yeah. Well,
and then when I was old enough to do it, Dad had me do it.
what we do, and we would take these loads to these dealers, like in Long Beach as an example, and the dealer down there, to save a telephone call long distance, he would give our man these orders for parts that he wanted, and then we would phone them in, see, and your mother used to phone those orders in, and our girl would phone them in, or we would, to these different parts houses around there, you see, and say those long distance, like the people out in San Fernando. So it worked, you know, two ways, especially for the.
So was this all the way through the 30s and the 40s?
Well, we finally cut that deal out because it got to working such a hardship on us and everything. So we finally cut out taking. Oh, the thing that stopped that deal on that was, you know, we used to make our statements out to these different dealers out in the outlying country that we would be working for, and we would have the driver, for instance, the Long Beach Auto Parts Company or the Long Beach Buick, so he'd the man make the delivery, he'd give the bill to the office there, and the same thing we were doing all around. Well, a post office got wise to that, and they put a stop to it. They said, you're trying to beat postage, and they won't let you do that.
No,
So that's the reason we had to quit doing that deal.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Think of the money we saved. Like, of course, in those days, I guess the postage was probably about 10 cents.
Less than that.
Jack, Tom was asking about this, and it's certainly of interest to all of us, but when did times get really tough? Can you remember that? Is that
Well,
it must have been at the time that they came to get our house, right?
Well, you know, the thing that always, I give Christian Science help in this whole deal. Pete and I used to, going down to work in the morning, we'd go ride together. We'd always come up with some statement of Mrs. Eddy's, something. And, you know, show you how we were blessed on this thing. For instance, it would get tough in the summertime for delivering for the department stores, or for instance like Fieldcrest Mills, where they sold blankets and all that kind of stuff. In the summertime, that business was inactive. Then business would turn around and we'd be flooded with tire deliveries, and the thing would balance out, see? And I always remember, like in the winter time or getting into the winter, the tire business would go big and some other things would fall off. And we had another pretty good racket that we had. We'd haul yardage by the big bales, you know, haul it down to San Pedro, and they would ship that to Taiwan or Japan or someplace. And then in a month or so, we'd go back down and pick up the finished product. So see how we knew that our supply was going to be from someplace, and it was. Just worked out that way.
Well, Dad says sometimes you just didn't even know how you were going to make that week's payroll.
Yeah, that's right.
That you realize.
Sometimes, I know, I always think about that deal. Sometimes we wouldn't know, we'd have to pay our payroll like on Friday night or something like that, and where the money was coming from. My gosh, in Monday mail would be the checks would be falling in that you weren't going to get until the 15th or Thursday or some other darn thing. But those checks would come in and we were able to make a deposit. In those days, you know, it took several days for a bank to cash a check and get it through the system. But that would happen too. I remember that deal, this friend of mine, Mr. Griswold, when he started in business, he used to give that as a testimony, how his bookkeeper would say, well, Don, we don't have any money. And he says, you go ahead and send those checks out anyway. And how he would tell how that would be met on Monday morning or whatever the date was. And we had that demonstration so many times. Like your dad and I used to say, boy, what would we have done without Christian Science? That's an honest to God fact.
Yeah.
Supply, business, like I say, business would fall off in some line, and would pick up in another. And we were really blessed.
But during the war, things really got busy for you, didn't they?
Oh yeah, sure, right.
So we're talking about the period from probably, what, 31 to 39 or 40?
Yeah, over there about that period.
Yeah,
right
10
there.
years.
Paul, can I ask one question? I'm interested in the way that you and Grandpa, or Pete, or how, well, the different, what were your jobs and what were his jobs, or did you overlap, or did you have different
we worked
titles,
together.
or everything was together? You
Yeah.
shared all of the different responsibilities?
Yeah.
Or there weren't certain things that you did that he didn't do and vice versa?
No, we just worked together.
Everything was shared.
During
and
the
you never got
war,
into an argument and all that time.
and during the war, you couldn't get help hardly, you know, and Pete used to take the Pasadena run. We'd close up the store.
Oh my
We'd close up the place at the 1 o'clock delivery, and we'd close the place up. We weren't even able to hire a girl for the office, and so we would close up the place, and he'd go to Pasadena, and I had the San Fernando Valley, and I'd make Hollywood on the way out and make a circle of the valley and come back in. And we had this company called the LA Stamp and Stationery, which was a blessing to us. And we had to be back at their place by 5 o'clock when they closed to take care of their mail to the post office. Now, your dad and I would race back to see, because we couldn't, you know, rely on some other guy to do it. We'd do that, and we'd beat it back there and get them. And I say, like, this LA Stamp was a godsend. We would make the bill up on Monday morning for them for the week. Transportation has to be paid within 7 days, or has to, you know, from the day you transfer. In other words, if you were doing something on Monday, you'd have to get your money in the next Monday. Anyway, so there's another blessing. We had this LA stamp,
Maury
Morrison.
Morrison.
Okay.
And we used to first thing Monday morning was to make up this statement and take it over to LA Stamp. And we had such a great friendship there. All we had to do was just wait for the check. And the gal would write out a check for us. And a lot of times that bill would pay our payroll. I tell you, isn't that a wonderful deal?
Yeah, Maury was such a blessing
he
to
a
you
great
folks.
guy, yeah. He was sure. Well, it turned out to be he had Christian Science in his background. When his mother passed away or something, of course we were good friends, but we never, talked too much personal things like that. But when his mother passed away, he got to talking about, passing on and so forth, and he completely released her, and he said, of course, we're not having any service. He said she was a Christian Scientist, and of course he had it in his background, and then he took it up actively after that. Joined the church, I guess, in Long Beach, and then out in Montebello he belonged to the church out there too. So wasn't that something? How that worked
Terrific,
out?
Jack. Let's go back, Jack. When did grandmother sell heliotrope? Can you remember that?
Well, let's see. Now we were married in '38. She must have sold it in about '39, right after that, and because Marion had married, and I was the only one at home, and of course Bob and Pat, they were still fairly good young kids,
They were living there, weren't they?
Yeah.
Bob and Pat and.
Yeah.
Now in '39, Bob went to Alaska.
Yeah, and that's when he went up there, and of course he married while he was up there. That's her name, Charlotte's her name, and Marion.
See, he was married down here before. He married.
Oh yeah, what's her
Remember
name?
Grace? Grace wasn't Elizabeth. It was.
His first wife.
Yeah, beautiful woman. I remember her.
Yeah, she kind of went haywire though, and he dumped her.
Did she go haywire? I didn't know.
Well, yeah, I guess she kind of went wacky or something.
So I guess he went up there after his marriage. Then he went up to Alaska. I got the feeling from him he went up there to get a better job, to get more money and.
Well, I think too. He was kind of unsettled at that time too. I think. So.
I see. But so grandmother sold heliotrope in '38 or '39.
About, I would say 39, yeah.
About the time that you.
I got married in 38, September.
And Pat got married
About that same time.
about that
too, I
same
think,
time, and Bob left. So, and Bill Jr. I guess went to live with his dad or something, didn't he? Or he.
No, I think he kind of ran off and got married too, didn't he? About
Dean,
that same
yeah.
thing, yeah. But
So then grandmother went to live with. Did she have a place of her own, or did she?
she went to move over with you folks.
Right. This was during the Depression.
Yeah, sure. Frances was sure sweet in taking her mother-in-law. And had these 4 kids at home, and then taking in a mother-in-law. Gosh, that was. And they were going to build a room on in the back, And I remember it was going to cost $5,000. A room and bath, remember, on the back of the house adjacent there, and it was going to cost $5,000. And boy, that seemed like a.
Nobody had it.
Oh, nobody had any money in those days, and I guess you were protected by not building it on it because it would have been too big a deal. Then from there, didn't she move over to the apartment there where Dorothy's folks owned? See, her Imogene wouldn't take her. Here she had a beautiful big home over on Highland Avenue or whatever that street was. Remember that?
Yeah. Yep. Over on Highland and Beverly,
Yeah.
just below Beverly on Highland. Great big fountain in the middle of the.
Yeah.
Remember that in the middle of the entry courtyard?
Yeah, and that's.
Ooh. We had 2 family reunions over there. Remember that?
Yeah, remember those? Yeah.
Big parties. We have pictures of those.
You still, have you got some of those pictures?
Well, you know who, Laura Jean sent them out with a letter a year or two ago.
Oh, yeah?
Copies of those pictures. So grandmother lived with us from roughly 39 to, what, she lived with us 2 years or?
About 2 years, yeah.
Do you remember, Jack, when the Lindbergh baby was kidnapped?
Yeah.
She had your mechanic from Main Street come out and put bars on all of our, do you remember that?
That's
And we grew up all through the 30s with these big strap iron bars on our windows.
Yeah.
You couldn't do anything on the window.
You can't do that anymore, you know, unless they're removable, you know, from the inside.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
They had great big light bolts in them from the outside. He drilled through them and. And I remember the big family fight was over bicycles. And grandmother said, over my dead body will those kids have bicycles.
Is that right?
And we finally got Schwinn bikes, beautiful bikes with that. It's now a classic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, now they.
Now it's a classic. It's that same model. It had a button on the side that you hit for the horn,
Oh.
and you got them from that. Where did you get them? You got them from.
Is that the same Schwinn company that made the
Motorcycles, sure.
So they.
Sure.
Isn't that something?
Grandmother said no bikes for those kids, and finally my mother put her foot down. I think we were 32.
Yeah, I was just like, well, I'm going to have to leave, and I.